Does your partner seem to have struggled to commit or have a fear of intimacy? One minute they're all soft and cuddly, and then the next minute they're cold as ice. Or maybe you struggle with these things yourself and you feel sick of falling headlong into relationships only to wind up feeling bored, smothered, triggered, or worried about hurting your partner just when things are supposed to be getting good. If this sounds familiar, it's likely high levels of emotional avoidance are sabotaging your relationships in the form of disorganized attachment, sometimes called fearful avoidance. And if you've experienced a recent breakup, there are certain things you need to know. In this video, we are going to examine 2 types of avoidant attachment and how it affects the breakup experience, how and why a disorganized or fearfully avoidant partner might break up with you, and if you are the disorganized or fearfully avoidant individual, how you can cope with the tendency to turn off just when things start to get good, how to heal disorganized or fearfully avoidant attachment, how to let love in once you find it, and how to reframe 4 core limiting beliefs for a fearfully avoidant individual. By the end of this video, you will have a clear sense of what type of avoidance your partner is struggling with, the reasons why your relationship might have ended, and what to expect now. If you are the disorganized or fearfully avoidant partner, you will feel empowered to create a loving and passionate relationship with anyone you want, gain a roadmap for how to establish a sense of balance and equilibrium in your inner life, learn how to receive love once you find it, and gain a script for ending automatic negative thoughts and opening up the possibilities for love in your life. But before we dive in, if you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Briana MacWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist with more than 15 years in the field, helping adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign so they can attract the soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want. And I do this using a psycho-spiritual approach to creative arts interventions, which I call the MacWilliam method. The content on my YouTube channel is derived from my online courses, which you can learn more about through the link in the caption of this video. If you would like to learn more about your attachment style, you can take the 4-question quiz. If you like what you see and hear and you want to learn more, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. I put up videos once a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. So let's talk about 2 types of avoidance. Notably, avoidance typically demonstrates itself in 2 distinct ways, and that is fearful and dismissive. Those that are more dismissive I call rolling stones, and these individuals seem to be cut off from their emotions. They're unable to reach the same loving and reciprocal emotional volume that their partners are usually capable of and deeply desire. They just don't pick up on or respond to the emotional cues in the same way, and they often feel frustrated, inadequate, and criticized by their partners who just assume that they don't care or they're too lazy. When someone like this breaks up with you, unless you reach out to them first, they're not likely to try to make the first contact with you, and even then they may not respond to your initiation. These individuals can walk away without ever looking back, even if they suffer in your absence. Then we have fearful avoidance, which is sometimes called disorganized attachment, and I call folks that have this attachment style spice of lifers. These individuals want connection but also are terribly afraid of it, and they tend to be suspicious and distrustful of their partner's love, as well as their own ability to sustain a healthy and loving relationship. These folks are hyper-vigilant with emotional cues and often overly sensitive to any kind of expression of needs. They find emotional honesty and direct communication very threatening and scary. And so if you have an uncomfortable feeling, they tend to automatically assume that it is their fault and that you are blaming them for it. These folks experience a lot of doubt and ambivalence, however, and they are likely to reach out to you after a breakup, regardless of whoever's decision it was to end things. They also don't like the idea that you might be okay without them and can get very jealous when you move on, even if they have already moved on themselves. It's important to know which type of avoidance you or your partner may have because the journey towards felt security will assume a slightly different angle in therapeutic treatment or if you intend to pursue self-help and personal development approaches. Today, we're primarily focusing on fearful avoidance or disorganized attachment and how this might impact the experience of a breakup. So let's talk about disorganized attachment in a breakup. Breaking up with a fearfully avoidant or disorganized partner can be very confusing and painful because oftentimes their inner emotional turmoil and chaos leaves them to go back on their decisions because they feel too confused about the breakup altogether. And that can leave you feeling confused and scratching your head without any clear solutions. This can also create a pattern of intermittent reinforcement, which stimulates activation of dopamine in your brain and encourages addictive tendencies, much like a gambler at the slot machine. Brain researcher and anthropologist Helen Fisher calls this frustration attraction. And breaking up with someone who responds to you on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement will be like weaning yourself off of drugs, quite literally. Additionally, if you both have significant wounding in your past, it's likely that you will begin performing what is called trauma reenactments, which are basically the reliving of old wounds. The hope is that this time you both will be able to revise the outcome, but unless you can resist defensive triggers, it's unlikely that either of you will be able to avoid the downward spiral. It's also important to note that individuals with a disorganized or fearfully avoidant attachment style can be polarized towards one end of the spectrum or the other because they tend to inhabit both anxious and avoidant tendencies, as well as can be susceptible to dissociative symptoms. The attachment styles of their partner can sometimes predict quite a bit about how the relationship will go and how a breakup will unfold. For example, Amy is a very creative and talented young woman. She has a deep sense of independence and a love of the underdog. She's also very analytical and takes great pride in having an unbreakable work ethic. She has a natural charisma and a talent for mastering anything that she puts her mind to. She has a few really good friends, but most of her social interactions are with amicable acquaintances. She's not a huge fan of dating seriously, though she's heterosexual, so men are typically pretty attracted to her. Part of her aversion to a serious commitment is that when she allows herself to have softer feelings, it doesn't really pan out so well. Now, in the past, Amy has a pattern of falling headlong into relationships and feels intensely intimate and connected with her partners for about 3 months. After that, she starts to feel overwhelmed and as if things are moving too fast for her. Her romantic feelings begin to wane and she starts looking for that stimulation elsewhere. At this point, Amy typically pulls back from the relationship and lets her partner know that she's not interested in deepening the commitment. It feels too burdensome and like too much of a responsibility. Her partner likes her too much and they are too nice. It all feels too easy and the relationship has become kind of boring and a turnoff. For about a month or so after establishing some distance, she begins to feel some relief. Now, if the partner is more anxious in nature, they usually pick up the slack by trying to establish contact with her again, trying to exhume the past 3 months. And Amy will assume the role of limiting and controlling how much contact she will accept and receive. This is the more comfortable position for her to be in, that of accepting or rejecting rather than reciprocating or actively offering something up and risking something, because she need not feel vulnerable in that position. Now, this usually spirals down into the anxious avoidant trap, which is a roller coaster relationship with a truly addictive quality to it. Now, if the partner respects her space and reduces the amount of time and energy and attention they give her, however, sometimes that relief can turn into a sense of not good enough. And so vulnerability, anxiety, and fears of abandonment start to emerge. Now, Amy starts calling and texting this partner again, a lot more amorously, trying to regain their undivided attention. She'll ask if they have started seeing anyone else, and if they have, she becomes intensely jealous and then tries to win back their undivided attention. Now, if she succeeds in this, there will be the pleasure of victory initially until she starts to feel that she has bitten off more than she can chew. And she starts to wonder if it was just her pride that was wounded and not her true intimate feelings, in which case, she's not really deserving of this partner. And so she starts to beat herself up over her own ambivalence and doubt. So now she begins to pull back emotionally, but feels a sense of obligation because she had fought so hard to win them back. Obligation leads to people-pleasing and a repression of dissatisfied feelings. She starts saying yes to things that she doesn't really want to do and plays along with future talking only to use passive-aggressive tactics to wriggle out of doing them when the time comes, like saying she will join her partner for dinner with friends and then having to cancel because she's working late. Or every time she's supposed to meet her partner's parents or attend some kind of family function, somehow she gets a migraine or food poisoning or the dog suddenly needs to go see the vet. Now, the constant maneuvering leads to resentment and feeling trapped or smothered. Eventually, she reaches a threshold and wants to end the entire relationship, seemingly out of the blue. And her partner is left wondering, what happened? And Amy is left feeling horribly guilty and undeserving of love. Now, Amy's presentation is particular in the level of ambivalence she experiences in her relationships based on how much her anxiety and her fears of abandonment may be triggered. This manifests as a need for control in order to feel comfortable with intimacy. And that need fluctuates based on what she considers to be an optimal emotional and physical proximity to her partners. In other words, sometimes more distance allows for greater control. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, until that distance could lead to a loss of control, out of sight, out of mind. And so Amy had kind of a sixth sense for detecting just the right recipe when it came to keeping her partners at a comfortable degree of closeness. Not too close, but not too far either. Just enough to keep them hanging on. And so today, you might find people referring to this as a form of breadcrumbing. Now, before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to pause here for a moment and ask, do you recognize any of these attitudes, symptoms, or behaviors in your experience or in your partner's experience? How might you have struggled with fearful avoidance or disorganized attachment? Please let me know in the comments below. So let's talk about how to cope with the turnoff. When fearfully avoidant or disorganized spice of lifers commit themselves to a relationship and then suddenly turn off or no longer feel sexually attracted or aroused by their partner, unless there is a medical reason for it, it's likely that this is a dissociative shutdown of the attachment system, which is trying to protect them from the threat of intimacy. They can be emotionally intimate or physically intimate, but when you try to do both, it can be overwhelming and unacceptable to a sensitive attachment system that equates intimacy with pain and a loss of personal autonomy and or identity. The spice of lifer is typically unaware of why this is happening because it happens on an unconscious and instinctual level. It's automatic. This is not a consciously aware thought process that takes place beforehand. And so in your waking mind, if you are the disorganized individual, you may still love this person. Nothing about them has changed. You may want to be with them, but your body and your instincts seem to be saying no. So now your mind starts constructing reasons as to why that might be the case. So we look to flaws in our partner to explain the sudden loss of chemistry. Or we might decide that we must not be deserving or good enough or fundamentally cut out for long-term relationships. This is where it can feel confusing, especially if you want to be able to trust your intuition, because intuition is also typically communicated through the body. But you cannot access your inner wisdom unless you learn to quiet the nervous system first. And intuition is nearly impossible to access if you are always caught in survival mode. Now, the quickest way to calm your nervous system is to deactivate it with certain breathing exercises. Box breathing is a really good example of this. This is drawn from the Navy SEALs. It's when you breathe in through the mouth for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and repeat. Now, if you would like to activate yourself, you can also use breathing techniques to stimulate your libidinal and sexual energy. Kundalini and tantric practices are particularly useful in this arena. I believe tapping into your creativity can also accomplish this, which is what I teach in my online courses. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how to charge up or discharge the life force energy in your body, I recommend watching my video on charge and the body. Additionally, if you were attracted before and suddenly you're not, recognize that it is likely to be something going on within you as opposed to attributing it to some flaw in your partner, or assuming that the chemistry must have just burned itself out. If anything, it could be evidence that the chemistry has blown up and now you're feeling a bit afraid. And this is likely to happen with every subsequent relationship you pursue once it reaches this stage of intimacy development, unless you take the time to go in and integrate what needs to be addressed on the internal level. So let's talk about how to heal disorganized attachment. So this process, I believe, is threefold. You have to address your healing on the level of mind, body, and spirit. In Amy's case, on the level of the mind, I might ask her to start by asking some really important questions of herself. Namely, how is she defining passion and arousal? So do you attribute it to an outside force that just takes you over and you have no control over it? If so, what would be the reframe here? So passion is an energetic experience moving through you. Usually we feel impassioned when we meet someone that provides a clear point of focus for accessing parts of ourselves that for whatever reason we otherwise have trouble calling upon. We experience passion when we feel spirit move through us with creative impulses and moments of awe, when we're able to kind of step outside of ourselves and really see the beauty and the miracles and the nuances of every moment and in everyone on this planet. We are also impassioned by familiarity and opportunities to relive in order to revise old wounding. This is the kind of immediate chemistry you typically feel when there's an opportunity, usually for some kind of trauma reenactment. In this case, you might experience a kind of adrenaline high, which expresses itself like obsessive preoccupation, while at the same time feeling kind of giddy and excited and nervous and high when you're around them. It might help to realize that excitement and anxiety light up in the same part of the brain and in the same way. The way we experience that kind of energetic momentum is usually defined by the context or the narrative that we assign to that experience in your body. Now, in my opinion, this is the whisper of spirit, letting you know that there is an expansive challenge emerging in your experience. Recognize that this challenge primarily exists in your internal world and spiritual life. The characters that may participate in this challenge in the external world are significant and important, but it's equally as important for you not to assign them profound meanings dreamed up by the ego to distract you from your own spiritual integration of those lessons. So whenever you hear yourself saying in your head, "I'm worried because I don't know if I feel that same spark," I would have you try this exercise, and this is inspired by Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap. So I noticed I have a worry, and I recognize that the worry is distracting me from something more positive that is trying to enter into my life. Okay. So then I imagine drawing lines around that worry or putting it in some kind of box or container and setting it on the shelf in my mind. Then I will open up my mind and ask myself where the new thing wants to come through in the landscape of my body. Then I will notice where in my body I'm experiencing a sensorial reaction. It may not be something that I viscerally feel right away. It could be an intuition that some part of my body stands out first. At that point, I'll just place a hand there and I'll make contact with it, and I will breathe into that part of myself, not trying to force anything, just remaining open and receptive with my mind and with my intention. And then I give it a few hours or even a few days. Eventually an intuition comes through and I realize that all of that worry is attempting to distract me from something. And at the basis of it usually is a fear of success or of intimacy. So let's talk about how to receive love. It's important to realize that healing disorganized attachment, which is basically learning how to regulate your emotions and your nervous system so that you can return to a state of balance and equilibrium more frequently and more quickly, is really not the end of the story. It's a great step, and once you've accomplished this, you've arrived at baseline. But now we have to look at the limiting beliefs that you have constructed over a lifetime to make meaning of experiences that you were helpless to control. Because despite all the progress that you have made, these are likely to be beliefs that would prevent you from receiving love even if it was staring you in the face. For example, Amy harbored such beliefs as, "I'm destined for a lifetime of numbness, guilt, and misery. There are so many things I need to work on. It's overwhelming and feels impossible to change. I'm tired of feeling guilty for not giving him the love that I believe he deserves. I was so selfish to keep wasting his time when I was half in and half out of the relationship. I feel or felt like a terrible person. I don't deserve it." Now, reframing these core belief systems is required before you can release automatic defensive thought patterns around things like worthiness so you can finally relax into love. This starts with recognizing when you're having a triggered thought and asking, is it true? Or is it an attachment story that is keeping me safe from the fantasy of pain or ultimate disaster? It can also help to recognize that emotions are just energy moving through the body, intended to give you information about your proximity to your own spirit, not to be repressed, but also not to be put in charge. So monitoring your triggers by becoming aware of what's called your window of tolerance is crucial to becoming a good interpreter of that kind of information. Learning, activating, and deactivating strategies to keep your nervous system well within that threshold is also a part of the work. Breath work and visualization is the quickest and easiest way to do this in a pinch. Realizing too that things like arousal and sexual attraction is life force energy, which is creative energy. And the more you exercise, entertain, and cultivate your creative energy in a variety of forms and outlets in your own life as an individual, the more you're able to summon that kind of energy and attraction for a widening variety of people. Because that energy ultimately comes from you. We just have a habit of holding others as a point of focus for accessing it within ourselves. So let's talk about reframing 4 core limiting beliefs for the fearful avoidant or the disorganized individual. When we are mired in our own cynical worldview and negative limiting beliefs, it's really hard to imagine any sort of reframe. So I wanted to end this video on a hopeful note by giving you a few inspirational examples. I'm going to offer reframes for 4 of Amy's limiting beliefs that we just talked about. So number 1, I am destined for a lifetime of numbness, guilt, and misery. Here's the reframe. Because I have learned that difficult experiences can affect my body on a physical level, I now have a greater command and understanding of what types of interventions would be useful in helping me to redirect my trajectory in life and in love. The numbness that I experience can be softened and reduced now that I know exactly what techniques I can use to retrain my nervous system and my limbic brain. I also understand that my body is influencing the way that my thoughts construct themselves, and by attending mindfully to the thoughts that are going through my head, come out like a river running past. I can choose to sit on the bank and instead watch them rather than drowning in them. Number 2, it's overwhelming and feels impossible to change. As I become increasingly masterful in understanding my emotions, conceptualizing them as energy moving through the body, and being able to organize them inside of me with increasing sophistication, I realize that the feeling of overwhelm is just my ego telling me stories to protect me from taking a chance on more expansive things that are ready to come into my awareness and my experience. The ego is afraid that I might not be able to handle them because in the past, I may have abandoned myself in not trusting my own worthiness. But that's okay, because it was all a part of my growth process, and it is a mechanism that did serve me at one time. But now when I notice myself beginning to feel overwhelmed, I can consciously turn my attention towards whatever I might be feeling, threatened or distrusting myself, and in that moment, offer reassurances to that part of myself, to assure the inner critic and manager that I am trustworthy, that I will not break, that I have a deep and abiding connection to spirit and to the essence of who I am, which is always operating on my behalf. Look how far I have come, and I can ask that part of myself to tell me what I would need to do to gain its trust in me again and to reparent myself by fulfilling that promise. All of this is within my power and more, and if I struggle with this process, there are always helpful and supportive people and resources I can access to help me along the way. Number 3, I feel guilty for not giving him the love that he deserves. While I am fully capable of recognizing the worth and the deservedness in others, I realize that I do not owe anyone anything for their ability to recognize the worth within me. Of course I am loved because I am love, and I recognize all others as expression of Source's love as well. We are all worthy and deserving. This is baseline, and I now realize that kindness, regard, and strength of character are the fundamental building blocks of any relationship, romantic or otherwise. Committing myself to a long-term romantic partnership, however, requires further, more detailed discernment and consideration of a variety of factors, not the least of which includes a serious look at the compatibility of our values and priorities in life. If someone wants me more than I want them, it is not my job to control or mitigate their disappointment or upset, and I am not the appropriate person for them to seek comfort from. I am also not the appropriate person to try to offer them comfort, because that is a mixed signal and it creates more pain and confusion than it does good. I embrace the knowledge that sometimes I have to be the bad guy by asserting my boundaries and recognizing the authenticity and emotional autonomy of all parties involved. I was selfish to keep wasting his time when I was half in and half out of the relationship. I know and trust that there is no such thing as a waste of time. In every moment, with every breath, I am moving through this miracle that we call life, and I am sharing this holodeck with other lighted beings in drag, butting up against each other and learning more and more about who and what we are. And in doing so, expanding the understanding and awareness of this collective consciousness we call God, Source, Spirit, all that is. Even my ambiguity and my indecision is an experience and an aspect of the human condition worth investigating. I am under no obligation to have to make decisions about life events before I'm ready. I am allowed to be indecisive. I am allowed to not know, and my partners are allowed to be frustrated with that or to be impatient. We are all allowed to have these feelings. It is not my job to take away their feelings with people pleasing, and it is not their job to force me into something I don't feel confident or ready for. And I understand that in this allowance, which ultimately encourages clarity to emerge in its own time, when the time is right, it will emerge. And when it emerges, wild horses couldn't stop me from what I know I must do, even if it's painful in the moment or displeasing to someone else, because my assertion is worthy of investigation, and their displeasure is also worthy of investigation. And this is most likely what we are here to investigate anyway. In fact, these uncomfortable experiences may be the entire point. And so it does not serve either of us to discount these experiences somehow less than or negative or holding us back, when in fact they are propelling us forward, as well as the collective experience as a whole. So let's review what we've learned today. There are two types of avoidance: dismissive and fearful avoidance, sometimes called disorganized attachment. Dismissive folks are disconnected from their feelings, whereas fearfully avoidant individuals usually are overwhelmed by them. In a breakup situation, dismissive folks are likely to walk away and never look back, whereas a fearfully avoidant individual will suffer with doubt and ambivalence and more than likely reach out to you again. But that doesn't mean that they have decided on you. It may just mean that they don't know how to be without you just yet. Now, for the fearfully avoidant individual, you may experience an unconscious and instinctual sense of turning off from your partner once things become more increasingly intimate. And this is a sign that you have to learn how to retrain your nervous system to tolerate increasing degrees of intimacy in your attachment relationships. This retraining is a healing process that will also involve learning how to receive love once you have established a baseline equilibrium on the body level and your window of tolerance. This includes examining the ways in which you define passion and accepting that passionate feelings are an expression of life force, energy, and creativity within you. The more you can cultivate these things in your individual experience, the more you'll be able to call upon excited or aroused emotions and feelings in the presence of a widening variety of people. Now, accomplishing baseline and harnessing your energy are fantastic accomplishments. However, you may still have negative thoughts and unconscious limiting beliefs that prevent you from really embracing your worthiness moving forward. This makes it difficult to receive love even when it is staring you in the face. So the practice of reframing your thoughts can help you shift your worldview and open up the possibilities for love. Just remember that everybody makes mistakes. You're never going to get it perfect, and you're never going to get it done. You have every right to be wherever you are in your process, even if that is in an uncomfortable or ambivalent place. And if you have suffered in love, there is grace on the other side of that, trying to find its way to you and into your heart. Now, I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. If you would like to learn more, I recommend hitting the like button, subscribing, and ringing the bell for notifications when we release our next video on this topic. Thank you, and have a good week.